Hello, Pisces. I feel like there's something very special happening around your energy right now. It almost feels like finding this message wasn't entirely random, because there's an emotional energy building here. Slowly, steadily, and honestly, it feels like it's been building for quite some time. Something has been kept beneath the surface for a while, a conversation, a confession, or maybe just feelings that someone has been trying very hard to bury deep within their heart. I get the sense that this person has been paying attention to you for much longer than you realize. They notice the way you treat people, the way you listen, the way you make others feel seen and understood. There's something very comforting about your energy, something that makes people feel safe when they're around you. And what's interesting is, the more this person tried to ignore what they were feeling, the more they realized those feelings never actually went away. Wow, that's a strong energy coming through. Because I can't shake the feeling that a very important conversation may have taken place recently. A conversation where your name came up more than once. A conversation that may have revealed more than this person originally intended. Okay, let's take a look and see what the cards want to reveal about this story. It feels like this person has been carrying that conversation in their heart for a very long time. Not for a few days, not for a few weeks, but long enough for all the things left unsaid to start feeling heavy. I keep seeing someone who revisits old memories more often than they'd like to admit. They think about conversations that once seemed completely ordinary. A sentence, a glance, a moment they barely paid attention to at the time. But somehow, as the months passed, those memories only became clearer. It's almost like there's a part of them that keeps wanting to go back and review everything from the beginning. Wow. That's interesting. Because as I lay the cards down, the Nine of Swords card comes through almost immediately. And honestly, this doesn't feel like someone who's angry. It feels like someone who's been losing sleep over things they wish they had said. Conversations that only exist inside their mind. Apologies that were never sent. Explanations that were never spoken. Feelings that were never fully acknowledged. They replay these moments over and over again, almost as if they're trying to rewrite a conversation that ended a long time ago. I get the sense that this person has asked themselves the same questions more than once. What if I had said something different that day? What if I had been more honest? What if I had listened instead of protecting my ego? And what's interesting is, the thing that troubles them most isn't what happened. It's what never happened. The conversations that never took place. The confessions that never made it into the open. The opportunities they let slip through their hands. There is so much regret sitting here, more than they've shown anyone else. Honestly, probably more than they've even admitted to themselves. Because on the outside, this person may seem completely fine. They go to work, they see friends, they keep moving forward, life goes on. But deep down, in a very private corner of their heart, they know something never fully closed. Then the Six of Pentacles card appears, and the energy shifts. This stops feeling like simple nostalgia. It starts feeling like realization. A realization that somewhere along the way, the balance in this connection was lost. Maybe they received more than they gave. Maybe they wanted understanding, but didn't offer enough understanding in return. Maybe they were given patience, given chances, given love, and at the time, they didn't fully recognize the value of what was being offered. Sometimes people don't realize how precious something is until it's no longer standing right in front of them. And honestly, that's exactly what this feels like. This person is looking back at everything from a completely different perspective. They're noticing details they once overlooked. The times Pisces stayed quiet. The times Pisces tried to understand them. The times Pisces chose to stay, even when there were reasons to walk away. And the more they look back, the harder it becomes to convince themselves that this was just another ordinary connection. Because the truth is, the deeper they look, the more they realize the impact Pisces has had on their life was far greater than they once believed. Then the Judgment card comes through, and this energy isn't loud at all. It's quiet, deep. Almost like the moment someone finally stops running from the truth. Not the truth about Pisces, the truth about themselves, that they miss you, that they have regrets, that there are things they wish they had done differently, and that if they were ever given the chance to sit down and have a truly honest conversation for the first time in a very long time, they wouldn't want to hide anything. Because right now, I don't think the most important conversation is happening between them and anyone else. I think it's happening inside their own heart. And honest, it feels like that's only the beginning. And the thing that stands out to me the most is that this person seems to have spent a very long time trying to convince themselves that these feelings would eventually fade away. That if they stayed a little busier, if they focused more on work, if they kept moving forward as though nothing had happened. Then sooner or later, everything would settle down. But the more I sit with this reading, the more I feel like things didn't unfold the way they expected. Because some feelings don't disappear simply because we decide to stop looking at them. And some people don't leave our hearts just because we try to walk in a different direction. Pisces feels very present in this story, not in a loud way, not through constant messages, not through frequent conversations, but more like a mark that was left somewhere very deep, deep enough that this person may go days without mentioning you, yet they still remember, still think about you, still wonder, still find themselves unconsciously comparing things to what they once felt when they were with you. When the moon card appears here, that feeling becomes even stronger. I see someone carrying a lot inside. Thoughts they've never shared with anyone. Feelings they don't even like naming when they're alone. Because once they name them, everything becomes more real. And honestly, that's exactly what they've been trying to avoid for quite some time. Admitting that they miss you is one thing. Admitting that they still have feelings for you is something entirely different. I get the sense that this is someone who has always been very good at managing how they're perceived. They want people to believe they're okay, that they've moved on, that everything is in the past. But deep down, there are moments when they have absolutely no control over where their thoughts go. A song, a familiar road, a scent drifting through the air, a random phrase they overhear, and suddenly memories of you come rushing back, without warning, without permission, almost as if they never truly left. You know, there's something else that's really interesting here. Because when the Seven of Swords card appears beside the Moon card, I don't get the feeling that this person is trying to deceive someone else. Honestly, it feels more like they've been trying to deceive themselves. They keep telling themselves they don't care anymore, but their heart keeps telling a different story. They tell themselves it's over, but their feelings refuse to cooperate. They tell themselves Pisces is just a chapter from the past. Yet every time they think about the future, your presence somehow appears in the background of those thoughts. And do you know which card made me pause the longest? The High Priestess card. Because the moment this card came through, I had the feeling that this person has always known more than they've ever said out loud. They know you've seen things. They know you've felt the things they tried to hide. They know you noticed the unusual silences, the moments they pulled you close only to push you away again, the times they wanted to open up but changed their mind at the last second. It's almost like they believed they were hiding everything perfectly. Yet at the same time, they knew that on some level you could see right through them. And that's both comforting and terrifying. Because when you meet someone who truly sees you, it becomes much harder to keep wearing the same mask. And I think that's exactly where this inner struggle is happening. Between what they feel and what they're willing to admit. Between what their heart wants to say and what their mind is still trying to hold back. Because the deeper I go into this energy, the more it feels like this person is standing very close to a truth they can no longer avoid. A truth connected to the feelings they've worked so hard to bury. A truth that even they are starting to find impossible to deny. And what's interesting is, as the first cracks begin to appear in those emotional walls they've built around themselves, it feels like what's waiting behind them is far deeper than anything they've ever allowed the world to see. There's a softness beginning to emerge within them. Not the kind of change that other people would easily notice from the outside. This feels different. It starts in quiet moments, private moments. Moments when they're no longer busy, no longer distracted, no longer trying to prove anything to anyone, just alone with their own thoughts. And honestly, the deeper I go into this energy, the more I feel like this person is no longer looking at this connection through the same eyes they once did. Something has shifted. It's almost as if they've finally stepped back far enough to see the entire picture for the first time. For so long, they focused on what was missing, what they wanted, what they didn't have. But now, they're beginning to see what they were actually given. The Star card comes through very gently here. Its energy feels like fresh air entering a room that has been closed for a very long time. There were things they didn't want to face before. Feelings they considered inconvenient. Thoughts they kept pushing aside. But it feels like they're no longer fighting those things anymore. I get the sense that they're slowly allowing themselves to feel. Just feel, without judgment, without running, without trying to control everything the way they once did. And when that starts happening, certain truths begin to come into focus. One of those truths involves you. Because I feel like there was a time when they believed distance would eventually fade the feelings away. That if enough time passed, things would simply become easier. But what they've discovered is something very different. Distance didn't make them forget. It helped them understand what actually mattered. Wow, I have chills saying that, because the Sun card appears right after. And this doesn't feel like loud happiness. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels more like someone finally opening their eyes after living in uncertainty for a very long time. Some things were always there. They just weren't ready to see them. There were qualities in Pisces that they once took for granted without even realizing it. The sincerity, the compassion, the ability to listen, the way you make people feel understood. Those are the kinds of things that are easy to overlook when they're always present. Sometimes people only recognize their value when they're no longer there. And honestly, that feels like exactly what's happening here. This person is looking back on old memories with a kind of gratitude they've never really felt before. Not because everything was perfect, not because nobody got hurt, but because they're beginning to understand that some people leave a deeper imprint on our lives than we realize at the time. And for them, Pisces is one of those people. Then the Judgment card appears again in the reading. And this awakening becomes even stronger. It's like they're no longer interested in telling themselves the old stories. No longer interested in blaming everything on circumstances. No longer interested in pretending they don't feel anything. No longer interested in seeing everything only through their own perspective. Because for the first time in a long time, they're asking a different question. How did that person feel? Not, what did I lose? But, what did I put them through? And that's a very different question. It's also the question that's softening their heart. I think this is the moment where ego slowly begins making room for sincerity. Not through one dramatic realization, but little by little. Like snow melting beneath sunlight. Like a door that has been locked for years, slowly beginning to open. And the last thing that really catches my attention here is the King of Cups card. This energy doesn't feel like the same person who appeared at the beginning of this story. There's less resistance, less defensiveness, less need to hide. I feel like they're learning how to sit with their emotions instead of running from them. Now, that doesn't mean they suddenly have all the answers. Honestly, I think there are still many things they don't fully understand yet. But at least, they've stopped denying what their heart has been trying to tell them. And when someone stops denying their truth, they often begin seeing things they once chose to ignore. And my feeling is, what they're about to see next may completely change the way they understand this entire story. But the thing that's confusing them the most isn't the fact that the feelings are still there. What's confusing them is that the empty space is still there too, a space they once believed time would eventually fill. And somehow, it still carries your shape. I genuinely feel like this person has tried to move forward. This isn't the energy of someone who's been sitting around waiting. It's not the energy of someone spending every day staring back at the past. Actually, it's the opposite. They've done all the things people say you're supposed to do when you're trying to let someone go. They focused on work, changed their environment, opened themselves to new experiences and new connections. They kept telling themselves that life had to keep moving, and life did move forward. But there seems to be a part of them emotionally that never quite moved at the same pace. The Eight of Cups card appears here as a very quiet image, almost like someone walking away with their back turned. Not because they stopped caring, but because they believed it was the right thing to do. I get the feeling there was a point when they genuinely thought distance was the logical choice. That stepping away would make everything simpler. That if they stopped seeing you, the feelings would slowly fade as well. But life seems to have shown them something completely different, because the farther they moved away from this connection, the more they realized they were carrying it with them. Carrying it in unconscious thoughts, carrying it in the way they view other relationships, carrying it in emotional standards they never even had before. And that's when a certain truth begins to emerge. Not every connection is easily replaced. Not everyone leaves the same kind of imprint. I think this person is learning that lesson now, slowly, one step at a time. Some people come into our lives and bring joy. Some bring beautiful experiences. But every once in a while, someone changes the way we understand love itself, the way we understand safety, the way we understand what it feels like to truly be ourselves. And honestly, I feel like Pisces belongs in that very small group for this person. Then the Four of Wands card appears and memories begin surfacing more often. Not the big moments. Not the dramatic moments, the ordinary ones. Conversations that seemed insignificant at the time. Moments when the two of you were simply sharing space together. Moments they once considered completely normal. And now those are the memories they miss the most. You know, sometimes what we miss most about someone isn't the grand promises. It's the feeling we had when we were around them. And that feeling still seems incredibly alive inside this person's heart. I see the Nine of Cups card beside the Four of Wands card. And what comes through here isn't just regret. It's realization. A realization that something genuinely beautiful existed here. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe it wasn't complete. But it was real enough to leave a mark. Deep enough to survive the passing of time. And what's interesting is that the more they recognize that truth, the harder it becomes to return to the version of themselves they used to be. The version that believed feelings could easily be replaced. The version that believed trying a little harder would eventually make them forget. Because now they're beginning to see the value of this connection from a completely different perspective. Then the Lover's card appears, and honestly, I don't experience this as the energy of choosing between two people. It feels more like the moment someone begins telling the truth to their own heart. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't admitting your feelings to someone else. Sometimes the hardest thing is admitting them to yourself. Admitting that someone left a bigger impact than you wanted to acknowledge. Admitting that you still care. Admitting that the empty space is still there. And admitting that the harder you tried to act as though none of it mattered, the more you realized how much it actually did. I think this is where the story begins to change. This is no longer a journey about trying to forget. It's becoming a journey about understanding why they never truly forgot in the first place. And my feeling is, the answer they're slowly moving toward may be far more honest than anything they've allowed themselves to believe until now. It feels like that realization eventually led them into a conversation they never expected to have. Not with you. At least, not yet. But with someone they genuinely trust. Someone who could sit and listen without judgment. Someone who made them feel safe enough to lower defenses that had been standing for a very long time. And honestly, I don't think this conversation happened on impulse. Quite the opposite. It feels like the result of many days of thinking. Many moments of picking up the phone and putting it back down. Many moments of telling themselves they didn't need to say anything. But eventually, they needed someone to hear the things they'd been carrying for far too long. What's interesting is that when the Hierophant card comes through, I don't see this as just an ordinary friend. This feels like someone with a more mature perspective, maybe someone older, maybe someone with more life experience, or simply the person they always turn to whenever life starts feeling too complicated. I keep seeing them sitting across from someone, no longer trying to appear strong, no longer trying to prove they're okay, just being honest. And you know what really catches my attention? They don't begin the conversation by talking about what you did. They begin by talking about what they feel. And that's different. Because up until now, it feels like this person has often viewed things through the lens of their own experience. But this time, they're talking about emptiness, about thoughts they can't seem to quiet, about the feeling that something never completely closed. And the more they talk, the more they realize they're talking about you, more than they expected. Wow, I really love this energy. Because it feels like even they're surprised by what they're admitting. Almost like someone walks into a room intending to discuss one thing, only to realize they're actually talking about something entirely different. Then the Three of Pentacles card appears, and the conversation starts going deeper. The person across from them isn't just listening. They're asking questions. Questions that make them stop and think. Questions they've spent a long time avoiding. What do you actually miss the most? What keeps bringing you back to thoughts of them? If this connection doesn't matter anymore, why do your eyes change when you talk about them? And honestly, those questions seem to touch something very deep, because there are certain truths that only reveal themselves once we speak them out loud. Inside our minds, everything can stay blurry, but the moment words leave our lips, things become real. And that's exactly what this feels like. Layer after layer of emotion being named. Thought after thought being brought into the light. Fear after fear being examined with a little more honesty. When the Star card appears, the energy of the conversation softens, not because every problem suddenly disappears, but because for the first time in a long time, they no longer feel like they're carrying all of this alone. Someone is listening. Someone understands. Someone is helping them see things from a different perspective. And the more they talk, the more clearly they begin to see Pisces, not the version shaped by regret, not the version shaped by selective memories, but the real you, the things you tried to give, the things you tried to build, the things they may have unintentionally overlooked. Then the Sun card appears. And honestly, this feels like one of those moments when something finally becomes clear. Not a shocking realization, not a dramatic revelation, the kind that makes someone sit quietly for a few seconds, because it's so real, so simple, and so difficult to deny. Almost like hearing themselves say out loud something their heart has known all along. that Pisces mattered far more than they ever allowed themselves to show, that these feelings run deeper than they once admitted, and that maybe what they've been searching for all this time wasn't a way to forget this story. Maybe they've been searching for a way to face it honestly. I think that conversation changed something inside them. Not because they received perfect answers, not because someone handed them a grand solution, but because it helped them see the very thing they'd been avoiding for so long. Because once the truth has been spoken out loud, it's hard to go back to who you were before. And honestly, I think that's exactly why they're starting to think much more seriously about what comes next. It no longer feels like passing thoughts. It no longer feels like emotions that rise to the surface for a moment and then disappear. Honestly, for the first time in a very long time, it feels like this person is finally sitting with a question they've spent months trying to avoid. What am I supposed to do with all of these feelings? Because there's a huge difference between realizing something and deciding to act on it. Realization is easier. Being honest with yourself is easier. But the moment those feelings begin touching the real world, fear shows up. The Two of Wands card comes through here, and it feels like someone standing at a crossroads. Not because they don't know what their heart wants, but because they understand that every choice changes something. If they stay silent, they may have to live with questions that never get answered. If they take a step forward, they'll have to face things they can't control. And honestly, I think that's what makes them hesitate. Not the feelings, the outcome, not the connection, the fear that things may have changed. The fear that time apart has created a greater distance than they realized. The fear that Pisces may have learned how to live without them. Wow, that comes through really strongly. Because the deeper I go into this energy, the more I feel that this person isn't as afraid of rejection as they are of discovering they waited too long. There are moments when they wonder, do you still think about them? Do you still feel anything at all? Or are these feelings now living only inside their own heart? I also feel like they've been paying attention in ways most people would never notice. When the Page of Swords card appears, it feels like they're gathering small pieces of information, not in an obsessive way, more like someone trying to understand how much of the story has changed. A post, a photo, a small shift in your life, things other people might overlook, but they notice them, because when someone still cares, they tend to notice the smallest details. And what's interesting is that the more they observe, the more they realize a truth they can no longer ignore. Life keeps moving, time keeps moving, and opportunities don't wait forever. I think this is where the Strength card comes in, not as the kind of strength people usually imagine, but as courage. The courage to face what scares you, the courage to stop avoiding something, the courage to accept that sometimes you have to step into a conversation without knowing how it will end. Because it feels like this person has spent so much time protecting themselves, so much time keeping their distance, so much time waiting for the perfect moment. And now they're beginning to understand that the perfect moment may never exist. Sometimes there are only moments when your heart quietly tells you it's time to be honest. Then the Page of Cups card appears, and the energy shifts almost instantly, softer, warmer, more genuine. It's like after all the thinking, all the analyzing, all the worrying, what's left is actually something very simple. To say what they truly feel, to be honest, to let someone know how much they matter. And honestly, I think that's what this person is moving toward. Not a perfect plan, not a carefully prepared speech, just sincerity. Something they've spent a long time trying to find again. Then I see the Seven of Wands card, and it feels like they're preparing themselves for a challenge. Not a challenge against you. Not a challenge against circumstances, a challenge against their own fears. Against the part of them that keeps saying silence is safer. Against the part that always wants to pull away at the last moment. Because the deeper I move into this energy, the more it feels like a decision is slowly taking shape. Carefully, gradually, but genuinely taking shape. And you know what makes me the most curious? Once people stop running from their feelings, the question usually stops being, what do I feel? And becomes something else entirely. A question that this person seems to be asking themselves more and more often lately. A question that keeps returning, no matter how hard they try to push it away. What if I actually listen to my heart this time? Pisces, I think the most beautiful part of this message isn't about what may happen next. It's about what's being realized in the quiet moments. Because sometimes a single conversation can change more than we expect. And sometimes all it takes is one honest moment for a heart to begin seeing everything differently. And honestly, it feels like there are still pages of this story that haven't fully revealed themselves yet. I'm really curious to see where this energy chooses to go from here. If today's message resonated with you in any way, Take what truly speaks to your heart and gently let the rest pass by. Thank you for spending this time here with me. You mean more to me than you probably realize, and I'm truly grateful for your presence in this space. I'll see you again in the next reading. Until then, be gentle with yourself. Take good care of your heart. Bye, Pisces.